Hello YouTube, this is Matt Pullen, and today we'll be examining an endgame study by Reti in 1928. And this endgame is rook versus pawn. If you're not familiar with the basic mechanics of rook versus pawn, I recommend you watch my other video on the subject first before diving into this one. Okay, this is white to play and win. The black pawn is moving down towards d1, and before we look at moves, we'll just talk about the basic properties of this position. The most important property is that black is attacking the white rook, so the first move kind of has to be a rook move. But other important properties, the white king is behind the passed pawn, and it's going to have a difficult time getting around the black king because the kings are in opposition. So both sides have incomplete information. White wants to see which side of the pawn the black king will be on so that white's king can run to the opposite side, whereas black wants to know which side of the board white will attack with his king so that he can keep his king on the same side, shouldering out the white king, as I pointed out in the other video. So first we'll look at rook h4, swinging the rook to the side, cutting off the black king along the fourth rank. Now here there are two legal moves for black. King to f5 obviously loses because of king to d6. So black has to push the pawn. And here the white king cannot get closer to the black pawn, as I mentioned before, because of the opposition. So we'll look at what happens if white tries to go around the long way. As usual, going around the long way, keeping the superior king on the same side as the defender's king, is going to be too slow. After d3, say white drops the rook back, the rook will need to guard d1 eventually. And now king e4, king e6, pushing to d2. And here the white king still can't get in, because of the opposition, and black is threatening to support the queen in two moves. So this is a draw. So king f7, bringing the king around the long way, is usually a bad idea. So what about king to d7? Well, here, because king d5, keeping the opposition, also works for black. But the simplest is just pushing to d3, because the white rook is going to have to lose a tempo to drop back to prevent the queen on d1. So king c6, d2, rook h1 is forced now, and then king d4, king b5, king c3. Again, keeping out the white king and threatening to support the queen in one move. So this is again a draw. Pretty much the only intelligent try is rook h5 check, forcing black to give white some information. And the black king can't go back, can't stay on the fifth rank, it has to go forward. So king to e4. And now white can move his king around to the opposite side of the pawn. But we'll see what happens. King d6, d3, king c5, d2. And now the queen is threatened. Which way does white want to prevent the queen? After rook h1, black just plays king d3, king b4, king c2. Again, keeping out the white king and threatening the queen. Rook d5 is another idea, but after king e3, king c4, king e2, again, white is a move too slow. So the problem with rook h4 is that in the positions that follow, white can't really improve his position, whereas black always has the possibility of pushing the pawn again. But we'll look at a more logical try, rook d1, bringing the rook as far away as possible while staying on the d file. So this ties the black king down to the black pawn, so the black pawn cannot take a step unless the black king is supporting it. So d4 is forced, otherwise king d6 just wins outright. And here, the white king again has incomplete information. If the white king tries to run around to the outside, then I haven't actually analyzed that, but I think black just plays. I think it's just an easy draw because black is going to gain a tempo by attacking the white rook. So instead, if king t7, then black to move really only has one try, because if he plays king e4, aiming to support the queen right away, then white has king to c6 moving to the opposite side, and then say d3, king c5, king e3, and then king c4. And here, king to e2 would be answered by rook takes pawn, and d2 would be answered by king c3 winning. So the immediate king e4 is losing because white then has enough time to go around to the opposite side. So after king d5, though, white is in zugzwang. Black has the opposition. So wherever white moves the king, black will just copy. So after king c7, black plays king c5, again not letting the white king pass. So here there are a few tries. King b7, black just plays king c4, king c6, d3, and this is an obvious draw because the black king is 2 moves from supporting the queen. Another try here is rook c1 check, and this allows the white king to go to the opposite side, but black is going to gain a tempo by attacking the rook. For instance, king d6, d3, king d5, d2. Actually, he attacks the rook with the pawn in this variation, sorry. So after, say, rook h1, then king c3, king e4, king c2. And even though the white king is on the opposite side, black is 1 move too fast. So here, white can also lose a tempo with his rook, and this is an important variation. In understanding this variation will help us understand the answer. After rook d2, again, this forces the black king to give way to the white king. White will be able to play either king b6 or king d6 next. But the problem is that white loses a tempo, because after king d6, king c3, black attacks the rook. Rook h2, d3, king e5, d2, and again, this is a draw. But that's very close to the answer. Here, I mean, this is just a drawn position. There's no way that white can force black to give way with his king. So here we are in the initial position. And you remember that position where white wanted to lose a move with his rook in order to force the black king to give way, but by doing so, he surrendered a tempo later on when the black king attacked the white rook. Understanding that variation will lead us to rook d2. It appears that we're not moving the rook as far away as possible, but this is actually to white's benefit, because after the forced d4, otherwise white just plays king d6 next, then white follows up with rook d1. And now it's black's move, so the opposition is in white's favor. And unlike the variation where the rook was over here, black cannot push the pawn by itself because of the influence of the white rook. So after king d5, well, first of all, king e4, white has enough time to go to the opposite side now because black divulged his information too quickly. King c4, d2, king c3, easy win. So here, king d5 is the best try, but now king d7. This takes the opposition. Any way the black king goes, white's king will go the other way. And there's no pawn push because the white rook controls that square. So one try is king e4, but after king d6 and king c5, this is a loss. Let's go back. the other move, king c4, leads to the same thing. King d6, d3, king e5, and then white also wins. So back here, king d7 is the only move to win, because if king f6, then king e4, and now rook e1 check, king f4. This keeps the opposition and threatens to push the pawn. So rook d1, king e3, king e5, d3 is a draw. So the key to this study is that white moves his rook to d2 in order to move to the best square, d1, later. He doesn't move to the best square right away because he wants to catch his opponent in zugzwang. So then rook d1, and then king d5, and the beautiful point, king to d7, forcing black to divulge information, and then white will bring his king to the opposite side. Well, I hope I did a decent job of presenting this beautiful masterpiece by Reti. Talk to you next time.